In 1943, the Vichy government of Nazi-occupied France enacted the policy of service du travail obligatoire, or compulsory work service, which conscripted hundreds of thousands of French citizens to perform forced labor in furtherance of the German war effort. Tens of thousands of French, mostly young men who were leftists, anti-fascists, members of the working class, resisted conscription and escaped to the wilderness of western and southern France, where they formed guerrilla bands to attack and harass the Nazis and their French collaborators. These resistance fighters were named for the rough, inhospitable land in which they made their bases of operation. In French, they were called the Maquis. It's kind of difficult to argue that the original Maquis, the real Maquis, weren't on the right side of that conflict. Some might question their tactics, their effectiveness, their impact on the overall outcome of the war, but they were definitely the good guys. Unless you're a Nazi, in which case... But the same question doesn't have nearly so clear an answer when we apply it to the fictional namesake of the Maquis in Star Trek. But we shouldn't expect anything else, since the Maquis were introduced in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and the most interesting episodes to feature them are found in that series. In the world of Deep Space Nine, moral ambiguity isn't just something people occasionally have to deal with. It's a way of life unto itself. Even though the Maquis were officially introduced on Deep Space Nine, the circumstances that led to their emergence were set up on Star Trek The Next Generation, where things were a lot less morally ambiguous. In the 7th season TNG episode Journey's End, Captain Picard is ordered to relocate a Federation colony from a planet that has been ceded to the Cardassians as part of a new peace treaty. Two more important details about that. One, the colonists don't want to be relocated, and two, they're descendants of Native Americans who came to this planet in the first place, hoping to forever leave behind their people's sad history of persecution and forced relocation. So, hey, good luck with that, Captain Picard. Let me know how that turns out. Admiral Nechayev emphasizes to Picard that this peace treaty with the Cardassians is the product of lengthy and difficult negotiations, and while the terms are not ideal, this is the agreement that both sides have reached, and it will mean peace between the Federation and the Cardassians. For this reason, though reluctant and extremely conflicted, Picard appears willing to force the colonists to leave. But at the end of the episode, a compromise is reached. The colonists will be allowed to stay on their planets, but they must agree to live under Cardassian authority and to give up the protections of Federation citizenship. The Native American descendants aren't the only ones to accept that compromise. Colonists from other former Federation planets that have been transferred to the Cardassians by the treaty also choose to stay under Cardassian authority rather than relocate. For their part, the Cardassians promise to leave the colonists alone, but when we return to these colonies about a month later on Deep Space Nine, we learn that, surprise, the Cardassians have not been leaving the colonists alone. In fact, it turns out elements within the Cardassian government have been secretly arming Cardassian colonists in the region, who have then been attacking the former Federation colonists in an attempt to drive them out. Some of the former Federation colonists, including many Starfleet officers, or soon-to-be former Starfleet officers, I guess, have formed a resistance group to fight back against the Cardassians. They've staged guerrilla attacks against Cardassian ships, blown up freighters suspected of carrying weapons meant to be used against them. They even kidnapped Gul Dukat. Oh no, not Gul Dukat, please give him back. And they call themselves the Maquis. So, a band of resistance fighters, sold out and abandoned by their supposedly altruistic former government, rebelling against violent fascists who have occupied their land. These Maquis are obviously the good guys too, right? Maybe. It depends on how you look at it. And for me, specifically, it depends on how you read the Maquis. Am I judging them based on what they represent metaphorically? Or am I judging them based on the literal circumstances of their fictional world? If I'm judging them based on what they represent in the story, then yeah, obviously they're the good guys, because their name and the situation they find themselves in, broadly speaking, mark them as stand-ins for real-life bands of freedom fighters, like the Maquis, the German anti-fascists of the 1930s, and other organizations that have resisted authoritarian governments throughout history. Read this way, the Maquis compels us to question the inherent goodness of the Federation and Starfleet, because remember, when we see the Maquis, the focus is usually not on their conflict with the Cardassians, but on how that conflict threatens the Federation and the peace treaty. Getting us to question our assumptions about the Federation and Starfleet is kind of Deep Space Nine's whole thing. The Federation and Starfleet are still the good guys, generally speaking, but that doesn't mean everything they do is good, or that they're always acting in everyone's best interests. Throughout Deep Space Nine's run, and particularly in the episodes depicting the Maquis, we see how Federation policies and Starfleet actions can bring about some pretty destructive consequences. Yes, the Maquis are violent outlaws, but, Deep Space Nine reminds us again and again, let's not forget what created the Maquis in the first place. A peace treaty signed between two powerful empires, one of which is nominally benevolent, which regards people's homes as assets to be traded. So that's the metaphorical interpretation, and by that reading, for me, the Maquis are clearly the good guys in their conflicts with the Cardassians and the Federation, and are morally justified in their actions because they stand for resistance against fascism and government authority wielded in a way that callously disregards the rights of the people under its power. But if we read the Maquis more literally, things look very different. Here's the situation in literal terms that exists in the fictional world of Star Trek around the time of the formation of the Maquis. The Federation and the Cardassians have been at war at some time in the recent past, but now they've spent the last little while hammering out an agreement to secure a stable peace that both sides will be able to live with. One of the concessions the Federation made to Cardassia was to give up certain planets along the border. Under the terms of the treaty, those planets become Cardassian planets. As a result, the Federation colonists on those planets need to be relocated. Now, is it fair to those colonists that they're being forced to leave their homes? No. Is it an indication that Federation society is not quite the utopia that it's usually depicted as? Yes. But is it a reason to resign from Starfleet and take up arms? I kinda don't think it is. The colonists on the planet in question have every right to be upset, and I'm sure, even with the advanced technology at their disposal, that moving from one planet to another on relatively short notice will be a hardship for many of them, physically and emotionally. Humans, as most of the Maquis members seem to be, are sentimental creatures. And we get attached to places, and we get upset when someone comes in and tells us we have to leave because people in power made a decision without even running it by us first. But the Federation is offering to move them to new planets. The Federation economy operates without money, so expense isn't an issue, and this is all being done in order to end what we are told has been a devastating and destructive war, albeit one that took place entirely off-screen because by the time the writers made it up, it was already over. These colonists aren't in territory that was captured and occupied by the Cardassians during the war. They aren't being drafted to do forced labor for the Cardassians, as was done to the real Maquis by the Nazis. Yes, by the time the Maquis begin operating on Deep Space Nine, they are under Cardassian authority, and they are fighting back against violence and harassment they're experiencing under the Cardassians. But unlike the people of occupied France, the people who chose to stay on those planets are not prisoners. They're still free to leave and take up the Federation's offer to be relocated to planets outside Cardassian territory. So, while they call themselves the Maquis The circumstances that lead to their rebellion on TNG and Deep Space Nine are significantly different from those that created the Maquis in France during World War II. In fact, I think that may be why, in Journey's End, the TNG episode that kicked off the Maquis storyline, the colonists who resisted relocation were depicted as being Native American, because without that link to a very specific, tragic, and inexcusable real-life forced relocation, it would be obvious that these colonists don't really have a leg to stand on. The Federation isn't forcing the Native Americans off their land so they can settle white people there, and they aren't trying to dilute or destroy their culture. Nor are these colonists being forced out of their homes for some secret or nefarious purpose by an evil admiral, as is the case in Star Trek Insurrection. They have to leave because their planets have been given away as part of a peace treaty, and that sucks for them, and I'm sympathetic to them. And if I were in their shoes, I'd be pissed off about it too. But if I knew I was being relocated to another planet where I'd be able to resettle and go on with my life more or less as it was, and that in exchange for me having to do that, we got to end a war, I think I could live with that. And though it may tarnish the Federation somewhat in my eyes, I'd also much rather continue to live under their rule of law than the Cardassians. Even in this highly evolved, prosperous, and generally just society, we see that there are occasions when the government has to make a decision that will place the long-term interests of everyone ahead of the immediate interests and happiness of a few. Is it ideal to force a group of people to leave their homes? No. At best, it's regrettable, even if you give them new homes and enable them to maintain the lifestyle and quality of life they enjoyed prior to the move. It's regrettable. But if you have to do that in order to end an interplanetary war? Come on. In the grand scheme of things, I'd call that a fair trade. Viewed from this angle, the Maquis storyline is one of the relatively few examples from Star Trek of the show telling us one thing while it's showing us another. From the way characters both in and outside the Maquis talk, we're clearly meant to regard the Maquis as people caught in an impossible situation they didn't create, fighting back against the militant and aggressive Cardassians because Starfleet and the Federation have abandoned them. But that's not the full story. The Federation offered to relocate them to new planets, an offer which, as far as I can tell, is never rescinded. If the former Federation colonists living on those planets that were ceded to the Cardassians want to move to other, safer planets outside of Cardassian territory, they can. Even now that they're under Cardassian jurisdiction, I'm sure between Starfleet, the Cardassians, and the ships the colonists themselves clearly have access to, a safe and orderly evacuation can be carried out. The Cardassians make it pretty clear that their intention isn't to trap and oppress or exploit the colonists, but to make life on those planets so inhospitable that they'll pack up and get the hell out. The Cardassians want them to leave. And if they do, once they're back in Federation space, they can look forward to being resettled somewhere else. The ones who actually join the Maquis might be in some trouble, but judging by what happens to Tom Paris after he's arrested and convicted of treason for working with the Maquis, it doesn't seem like they'd have to fear harsh punishment. New Zealand looks lovely. The Maquis are presented as antagonists, for the most part, but sympathetic ones. They're opponents of Captain Sisko, though not quite enemies, with the exception of the subject of my previous video, Maquis leader Michael Eddington, who Sisko pretty clearly considers an enemy. But like Eddington himself, the Maquis aren't the bad guys, but they aren't exactly the good guys either. It's easy, and I think necessary, to take their side in their fight against the Cardassians. But their conflict with the Federation is a lot more complicated. Their opposition to and disillusionment with the Federation is certainly understandable. But given the larger context in which the Federation makes its decision to give away those planets and attempt to relocate those colonies, and the fact that the Federation seems willing and able to make things right with the displaced colonists, short of violating the Cardassian Treaty, even after the Maquis begin using violent guerrilla tactics, their continued hostilities against the Federation start to seem unreasonable. Forced relocations are bad, and they carry a lot of ugly historical baggage. No one likes the idea of the government compelling them to leave their home. If government agents show up at your door and say, hey, you've got to leave, we just traded this area to a hostile country we've been at war with, of course you're going to think those government agents are assholes. But if they promise to move you to another town on their dime and buy you a new house just as nice as the one you have now, that's not a bad deal. If you factor in that moving out of your old house is one of the conditions necessary to end a war, it becomes an even better deal. And if you decide you'd rather stay in your old house and fight a hopeless battle against that hostile country and your own government, instead of taking that deal, there comes a point where you cease being a brave, principled freedom fighter and you become just another asshole. This video was commissioned by Keith Rautenberg. Keith, I hope you think I did okay. Like I said, for me, it depends on how you read the Maquis. If you take them as a metaphor for actual groups that have resisted fascism and other types of overbearing government authority, then they're absolutely justified in what they do. If you take them literally within the world of the story, not so much. I'm not currently accepting new commissions, but when I am, I will definitely let you all know. In the meantime, if you want to support this channel, you can do so by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Steve Shives, becoming a channel member by clicking the join button on the YouTube page, or by making a one-time donation via PayPal or Venmo. The links for all of those are in the video description. And of course, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe because that helps me out as well, and it's free. What do you think of my assessment of the Maquis? Agree? Disagree? Let me know in the comments. I look forward to reading what you have to say. I'll be back with another video soon, so until then, take care everybody.